If you consider 70-something years, one day is not insignificant. It's a very significant unit. Perhaps it would be insignificant if you lived 1,000, 2,000 years, but in 70 years, one day is a lot. Valuing it. It's a precious and scarce gift. Isn't it the same in economics? Scarcity gives things value. Try to have a certain economy of life and realize that a day is not to be wasted. It's a unit of what you have of greatest value, which is life. Hello. Today, we will continue reading the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and historical philosopher. Today will be a bit different because we will have only one chapter, Book 7. Since it's a bit longer, we will cover it separately. We still have 2 more sessions where will we see chapters 8, 9, 10, and 11. And we conclude this pleasant reading together. I hope this is being good, useful, and constructive for you, generating meaningful reflections. Well, in this 7th book, he starts in the first paragraph by saying the following. What is vice? Something you've seen many times. Everything is ordinary and fleeting. There is nothing new. So, Marcus Aurelius' statement is interesting because it reminds me of a situation of my own, and something similar might have happened to you, because this philosophical nature is within all of us. I reiterate, many times people write to me, and I am not an academic philosopher. Well, I have nothing against academic philosophers. I even like them, but I am addressing the philosopher that lies dormant within you, regardless of what profession you practice, or which academic career you chose to pursue, or fear that you didn't pursue any academic career. So, this philosophical nature that seeks to find meaning in everything, I recall several small episodes in my life that became significant. When I was young, I dreamed of leaving Brazil because I thought there was some place where something fantastic was happening. The people were all very good, very wise, very special. Thankfully, that I began to delve into philosophy before embarking on these journeys, because I was able to understand that, in fact, this wonderful place, it wasn't in any external place, it was within me. Because when I went abroad, I realized that behind a slightly different cultural attire, what exists is the same human being, driven by the same factors, the same selfishness, the same pride, the same personal self-interests. Above the interest of the whole, that is, the same fundamental issues, just dressed in something, let's say, a bit appropriate to that culture. And that's a bit of what Marcus Aurelius is saying here. What is vice? These are things that are out there. They're not new. Simply because we don't want to climb to the next level, because we don't want our consciousness to rise closer to the whole, to the vision of the whole. We get caught up in the details. The detail of the step we are on, so that we have a foothold that holds us, preventing us from being pulled upwards or perhaps downwards. So, we take the details and focus on them. These are things without much relevance and without much importance. When we look, the energy of our life is revolving around an insignificant point. And, just as the center radiates its qualities to the periphery, the center radiates its qualities to the entire circumference. We make our lives revolve around trivial things. Vice is when you start focusing on something that isn't the true reference point of a human being's life, that doesn't instill consciousness, that doesn't bring elevation, that doesn't generate a bit more wisdom. And then we cling to points that are sometimes amusing. Imagine, without seeking this in the lives of others, but looking into our own lives, how certain cycles of our lives revolved around certain centers that didn't deserve so much of our life's time. Irrelevant, trivial centers, and we don't realize, caught up in it, that this was a form of escape. Deep down, vice is a form of escape and necessary growth, which comes at a cost, requiring protagonism, will, and a reference point. Where are we heading? Continuing. He will say, never forget that the value of each person is equal to the value of what they cherish. Certainly, a person's affinities are of the same stature as the level of their consciousness. And then it brings back that biblical proverb that says, "By their works you shall know them," that biblical passage. Evidently, my tastes, my interests, my topics, my life motivations reflect the level of my consciousness. For those who watched the Kybalion, it talked about this in the principle of vibration. The point at which we are vibrating is our internal name. What do you have an affinity with? What brings you some degree of satisfaction? And if you want to know if you've grown, just ask if your vibration has become more subtle. If you've moved from one point to a slightly more human point. In other words, we know a human being by their interests, their fixations, their life goals. That is your stature. Not definitive, but from the current moment. If we want to grow, we need to know where we are, which is where we want to go. That's how we move when we're looking for an address. To know where it is and to know where we are, where our starting point is. That's how we can move and get there. Next, he will say, seek the purpose in the discourse, the meaning in the endeavors. It seems like a simple little phrase, but it's not. Consider what I mentioned to you in some classes. I was saying that the universe, for Marcus Aurelius, for the Stoics as a whole, is an ordered universe. Human life is ordered. It has a purpose, it has a starting point and an end point. And there's no way to walk productively if you don't have this axis oriented within your life. I know what I am today. I know what I want to become so that my life has real meaning, so that it has real time. It's evident that a life that is ordered as a whole means your discourse is also ordered. Your endeavors are ordered. Everything you do is imbued with meaning and has a constant progression. Without haste and without pause, but always moving towards it. So, imagine a person, of course, sometimes it might just be a mere speaking habit, but there might be a connection between this and a person who, when talking to you, has no quest, no objective. In that conversation, what we call shooting the breeze, circular topics that start from nowhere and lead to nowhere. Later, when this person tries to express themselves in front of an audience, it's difficult to break this habit and have a directed discourse. If the discourse isn't directed, it becomes unbearable for the listener. Even within a conversation, the endeavor is the same thing. All the time, knowing where I want to go with this. What are my objectives? When I talk about time management and talking about this, goals in all areas of life. For all dimensions. Life as a whole, the decade, the year, today. In other words, the guidance, the direction of life. The small things are only possible when they exist within the macro. In your life as a whole, I know where I want to go with this. Alone or with others, what I do should only serve this purpose, the utility and convenience of society. All my actions should aim for a positive outcome and for an ever-growing group. From the moment I think about the utility and convenience of society, not just for anything, but the utility and convenience to make it a more humane society, I soon think about this country, then this planet, and eventually the cosmos. In other words, what is good for me is what adds value to the whole. As I am an integral and conscious part of the whole, I benefit when it grows. Otherwise, you fall into selfishness, which ultimately is self-destructive. Because by not adding value to the whole, it becomes impoverished. And it impoverishes you too, as you are an integral part of this whole, whether you like it or not. Never be ashamed of being helped. This little phrase reminds me of a point made by the philosopher I admire so much, Roger Scruton, when he said, "Look, in our quests for independence, although valid every now and then, they should go hand in hand with a quest for interdependence, which is very necessary for us to learn to value." What the other? May it allow us to learn to value what I can give to others, not in the sense of exploiting, not in a utilitarian sense, but in the sense that we form bonds through this act of helping and accepting help. to give and to know how to receive. Roger Scruton even mentions the Scouting movement and how it is positive and productive in fostering this spirit. Otherwise, independence can lead to a certain arrogance, making one believe they don't need anyone. And we are all born for one another, as Marco Verde himself says. Independence, but in the right measure, without eliminating the positive, healthy interdependence that weaves bonds in this social fabric. Let the future not trouble you. Armed with the same reason that guides you now, you will face it when the time is right. In other words, what will the future bring? I will face it with the same tools I have today. If I remain true to my human condition, I will be able to provide human responses in the future. This reminds me a lot of a scene from a movie I really like, which you all probably know, Gladiator, where the main character, Maximus Decimus Meridius, a fictional character, at a certain point becomes a gladiator. Inside an arena, he, who had once been a Roman general, leads a group of gladiators, with the intention being to kill them all. Roman soldiers would come through a door on horseback, and the intention was to wipe them out. And he approaches his comrades in the middle of that arena, and he says, "Whatever comes through that door, if we stay united, we have a chance." This is something that left a mark on me. Perhaps it was what impacted me the most in the movie. Whatever comes through the door of the future, if I remain united with myself, with integrity, and, at the same time, in the willingness to unite with those who work for the same cause, with those who work for the good. Whatever the door of the future brings, I am capable of providing an appropriate response, whatever life says, no matter the language used. I will respond by speaking the language of a human being who would leave a trace of humanity in the world. That is very beautiful and very interesting. All things are connected by a sacred bond, and almost nothing is foreign to another. Coordinates converge for the harmony of the same world. In several lectures, I also used to tell you how beauty is composed. A beautiful painting. It's a combination of colors, each completely different from the others, in various shades, that blend harmoniously to create beauty. A painting of just one color alone would hardly be considered beautiful. A beautiful melody, the combination of different notes, in various scales, that blend harmoniously to produce beauty. Something of a single note. It probably wouldn't be beautiful. And so are we humans. Each of us, being who we are, respecting who we are, creating and preserving our own individuality, when combined with everyone else, we become a work of art. In other words, we think that to live in society, we have to be like everyone else, which is massification. Quite the opposite. By conforming to massification, we reduce ourselves to half of who we are. That is a mutilation. Mutilated men, in general, are not very good at living in society. They lack the necessary tolerance, patience, and virtue that life together demands. If you are not upright, straighten yourself. The expression he uses at another point in the book is famous, where he says, "You must be upright or be straightened." In other words, if we lack uprightness, coherence with human principles, we must strive to achieve it. There is no other way. We came here precisely to smooth out these rough edges. What you haven't achieved yet, set it as your next step. One must have as a goal, as a sense of life, to become increasingly coherent with what nature expects from a human being. What is already upright? Great. What is not yet? This is my mission. I came to straighten it out. Because that is the best thing you can do for yourself and for humanity. A humanity that needs truly new references. Although separated, rational beings are like members of individual bodies, as they are formed to cooperate in a single work. Very similar to what we talked about just a moment ago. If we consider humanity as a body, as a being, the majority of me is others. And learn to cooperate for the whole, to think about the whole, to use as a reference for my actions, how I can not just take advantage of this circumstance, but how, through this decision, I can benefit the greatest number of people possible. Did you know that this is something that can be taught? Can it be pursued? You just need to correct your focus every time you notice it's distorted and selfish. Correct your focus. You notice how human nature is malleable. In no time, you've already adapted, assimilated something new. I find it curious because all things, as I told you, we are very small. Therefore, the experiences we have to reflect on are these tiny ones. Some already know that I am a big fan of chocolate. But I didn't have much fondness for dark chocolate. But since people knew I liked chocolate, they started gifting me, bombarding me with dark chocolate. I tried the first one, not to be impolite, I tried the second. Now, after trying it, this morning, trying the 10th one, I realized it was no longer as repulsive to me as the first one. I realized, whoa, I'm changing my taste. Well, if this is possible on a physical level, why wouldn't it be on all levels? Whoa, what consideration am I prioritizing to govern this decision? My interest or the interest of the whole? Or the largest group I can consider? In my current state of consciousness, this can be re-educated. We are beings under construction. Don't consider yourselves complete. We can greatly modify our possibilities. We can learn to use these tools that are within our human toolkit. And we must. I must be a man of integrity, despite what they do or say. It's like gold, emerald, or purple. Repeat despite what they do or say. I must be an emerald and have this purple. Beautiful. That's interesting. It reminds me of when he talks about gold. Plato's golden man, exactly the civility of gold, to be in contact with human skin and never become corrupted. No external circumstance robs it of its nature and properties. And when Plato talks about the golden man, he envisions exactly this characteristic projected onto the human being. Circumstances do not rob me of my human nature. As Kant says when he talks about the beautiful and the sublime, a raging sea, the cliffs of the Alps, can kill me, but they cannot corrupt me. My dignity is as inexorable and grand as a raging ocean or the cliffs of the Alps. No one can take that away from me. Genius, good, a calm mind. That is happiness. In other words, being able to impose self-control, being able to impose human values over instinctive inertia, life over mere survival, and maintaining a calm mind. It becomes much easier when you feel at peace, when you feel at one with the sky and the earth, at one with human nature, at one with what the universe expects from you. It's the sleep of the just. It's what most ensures our happiness. Because we have transformation. What can be done without transformation? What is more pleasant, more familiar to the nature of the whole? How will you nourish yourself if the food doesn't transform? What useful thing can be done without transformation? How would you live if your body couldn't assimilate food, transform it into nutrients? If in the kitchen you weren't able to transform an element, often unfit for consumption, into something nutritious and tasty, if life didn't constantly process and transform things, how would we be alive? Transformation is a law, a necessity of the manifested world. I recall for you that Hindu tale, which says that Shiva, who is precisely the god of transformation, at one time realized that humans were angry with him, feeling that he was taking something from them, always transforming their things. Even causing the death of living bodies, Shiva, deeply hurt, gathers all his agents on earth and leaves. And then things start to rot and do not fertilize the earth. And the earth becomes barren. Bodies die from diseases, they begin to rot. They don't decompose and start to contaminate the entire land. Food becomes scarce, plagues spread, until people, aware of the mistake they had made, organize a procession and go in search of him, asking him to return. That's when he is recognized. In his place, he returns with all his agents upon the earth. Like his dead, continuous. Let's not seek continuity in what cannot have continuity. There is another plane where continuity operates. The plane of consciousness, where one seeking wisdom, there it is continuous. In the manifested plane, transformation is the law. It is the only eternity of the manifested plane, the eternity of transformation. And it is not random, it follows a purpose. To love even those who offend you is given to man. You will also succeed if you never forget. Who are your relatives? Men. For they err out of ignorance and involuntarily. Just like you, they too will soon die. Above all, remember that they do not harm you, for they do not worsen your soul. If someone treats you badly, if someone is unjust to you, they can hurt you, as the works of Castaneda say. A warrior can be wounded, but not offended. They can hurt you momentarily, dim your shine, but they neither make you lose nor gain any virtue from it. Reflecting on this can encourage you to grow. But this fact in itself does not make you diminish nor grow like your brother. Virtues are neither lost nor gained in this way. Therefore, they give affection to the essence of your life, and also know how to consider the depersonalization of others' flaws. People do what they do because of who they are, not because of who you are. Was it the best they managed to be? Isn't it something that was handpicked to target you? Is it simply the level of consciousness they are at? And who suffers the most from the level of consciousness they are at? They themselves do. Therefore, being able to not let the outside world alter your nature. This is an art, he reminds me. I always illustrate in my classes in the following way to make it very clear. If you walk down the street and a dog barks at you, you don't bark back at it. He is a dog, you are human. Each person expresses themselves as what they are. And I reserve the right to express myself as who I am. No one has the right to determine how I will respond, how I will act in the world. This is completely autonomous. And it is part of my will and my freedom. Keep yourself within yourself. It is inherent to the nature of a balanced soul. To be self-sufficient when practicing virtue, gaining serenity through this practice. This is fundamental. From the moment we practice a virtue, we have an act that does not aim for good in itself, but there is a later recognition. Aims for some kind of future benefit. You are not practicing good, you are making an investment. Because if it doesn't yield the desired result, soon you won't want the good anymore. A person's satisfaction must lie in the very act of having behaved in a humane manner. Will the fruits come or not? Maybe it will come one day, maybe it will never come. There are men who are sometimes recognized centuries after their existence, and there are some who are never recognized. Even though they deserved it, the issue of being recognized or not is a problem of humanity with its level of consciousness. It's not my problem. My problem is to plant the seed. Who knows, maybe one day it will sprout. I did my part. I was able to preserve and plant my seed upon the earth. This is the idea of autonomy that Immanuel Kant speaks so much about and which is also so important in Stoicism. Reflect deeply on your final hour. Leave the mistake with the one who made it. It's very interesting to see the face of Marcus Aurelius. Always think, if I were to die tomorrow, what would I be doing now? What would be important right now? Recently, I saw a debate about this, with some people commenting, well, it's not good to take into account the opinions of those who are on the brink of death. Because, out of loneliness, out of need, they might focus only on the human aspect. They wanted to spend more time with family, wanted to be with friends, and disregarded other things that were also important. I agree. Thinking about the meaning of life as a whole doesn't necessarily mean listening to the opinions of those who are on the verge of death. That perhaps this isn't such a lucid state of consciousness. But ask yourself every day, today, if I were to die tomorrow, would I be at peace? What connects heaven and earth? Do you have the ability to have a key idea of where you're heading? I want to be a more integral, fair, and coherent human being. Align all areas of your life in this direction. The professional, the intellectual, the family sphere, the spiritual realm, all aligned in this direction. And with life goals, as a whole, in each of these areas, for the decade, for the year, for the month, for today. As I mentioned to you, this is my time management course, where I go into great detail about this. Now, it's important to know, and this gives us serenity, that it can be. Because if I asked myself, if I were to die tomorrow, I would feel a certain anguish because I didn't do my best. But what gives me the most serenity is knowing that I did the best I could, given the level of awareness I had and the tools I possessed at that moment. Helena Blavatsky has a wonderful phrase that says, "Whoever does their best does all that can be expected of them." I don't know of anything that holds us back. As much tranquility as knowing that there might have been a better way to manage the priorities of our lives, a better distribution of our time, but with the tools I had up to that point, I did my best. And by doing your best, you do all that can be expected of you. And use each day to be a little better and more capable than yesterday. Once I heard a prayer that really struck me, one I've never forgotten. It said, "Lord, may I do the most I can today, but may I be able to do more tomorrow." I found that sensational. May I give my all today, but may I have grown a little by tomorrow. Don't get stuck at this point. This justifies the question, consulting death, taking death as an advisor. This pause that you should take several times throughout your life. Ask, if I were to die tomorrow, have I been giving my best? And have I been striving to refine my vision so that this limit of my best keeps expanding? That is the right question to ask death. And not necessarily listen to what a person who is at death's door is saying. I agree. There may be some flaws that arise from the very anguish that this moment generally brings forth. Surround yourself with simplicity, of modesty, of indifference to the things in between virtue and vice. Love humankind and obey God. The poet said that everything follows the immutable law. Poet, evidently, man. Look, surround yourself with simplicity, with modesty, with indifference to the things in between. But you just said that I'm going to do my best, right? Better is intermediate. It's intermediate if you consider a complete human being. Within what I could do at that moment, it was the best I could give. Be careful not to settle for things that are just so-so. I did it so-so. I did that work so-so. I treated that person so-so. I lived so-so. I loved so-so. I grew up so-so. What kind of human being is that? What kind of life is that? Life is about reaching the fullest of our possibilities. Do not accept the intermediate between virtue and vice just because everyone else is doing it or it requires less effort. In this universe that corresponds to me, am I giving my best? Never just so-so. Today there is a certain misconception about this. That's perfectionism. That's not knowing how to live. But on the contrary, knowing how to live is respecting life with everything it offers us. And not throwing it away. In every moment, my best. Don't accept just so-so. Otherwise, you'll have a so-so life. Nobody wants that. You must accept with compassion what happens to you. Always and everywhere. Treat with justice those with whom you live. And watch your thoughts with the utmost care, so that no bad idea takes root in you. So that no bad idea takes up residence. They come and go all the time. But do not identify with them. Do not let them settle in and become the center of your actions. Do not let them guide your actions. Don't let anyone steal from you your sense of human life, which is to occupy this central role. Accepting with compassion, as we've mentioned several times, is not about being passive. It's simply understanding that life is cosmos, not chaos. What life brings me at this moment is the best it could offer for my growth right now. But to accept, find meaning, and even love the events of life, which is the old story of amor fati that originates right here in Stoicism, to love the facts of life as they present themselves now, doesn't mean you will be passive. They are steps that will be points of support for me to lean on and propel myself to a higher level. I accept that it exists as it is. I don't become bitter. I don't try to shift the responsibility onto anyone else. But I lean on it to propel myself to an even higher degree. Do not confuse the acceptance of the Stoics with passivity. If there was something they were not, it was passive. We're looking at a book by an emperor who wrote it in the midst of the battlefield, and not a man who rested in his palace while battles raged in his absence, but a man strongly committed to life. Accept the accidents that happened to you, and they were, in some way, woven into the fabric of your life. What could be more necessary for you? Nothing happens to a man that is not characteristic of man, says Marcus himself. In other words, if this came at this point in my life, it was precisely this obstacle that I needed to overcome in order to grow. If I don't overcome it, I've set a limit on my growth. But facing obstacles, adversity as an opportunity, is a very strong element within both beings. Don't fight against life's circumstances, but consider that life knows better than you do. What can be useful for you to grow now? This abolishes rebellion and all feelings of bitterness and thoughts of anger and resentment that come along with rebellion, which are all paralyzing. These feelings and thoughts tend to believe that someone has to be blamed, someone has to. No, I am the victim. Turn your gaze inward. Therein lies the source of inexhaustible good if you seek it without ceasing. Or in other words, there is an infinite capacity that you need to experience to feel that you have it. If you set it as a life goal, as I was just saying about the bittersweet chocolate, from today on, I will start looking more into people's eyes to feel what they are experiencing, to know when to help them, to know when they need me. I am going through life so mechanically that people need me and I don't feel it. Today, I'm going to start doing that. Look into people's eyes when greeting them. When I interact with them, I want to feel people. I want to develop empathy. If you start practicing with discipline, you'll notice that soon it begins to give you great satisfaction. You think, how did I give this up? How rich is this? How wonderful it is to intimately engage with human nature. Not personal and vulgar intimacy, but intimacy in the sense of being committed, to lift them up, to contribute to their continued journey. And if, at a certain moment, it becomes the most pleasurable thing in your life, because human virtues also bring pleasure. It's not just the vices, that would be unfair. And if we think they don't bring pleasure, it's because we haven't experienced them. Therefore, we reject what we do not know the taste of. The art of life resembles more a battle than a dance. We must always be alert and on guard against sudden and unforeseen blows. And why is it like this? Because we cannot glide elegantly, like in a dance, but every now and then there is impact. Because we are not yet what we should be, which is a complete human being. So, it's like you have a puzzle and you have to fit into it, but your piece has flaws. It has excesses, it was poorly cut, it has edges, it has things that don't fit. So, evidently, those poorly worked edges will attract the chisel that will want to sculpt you. And of course, when you identify with your flaws, the chisel will seem cruel. It seems like it's mutilating you. The Indian Bhagavad Gita, which is a masterpiece, is exactly about this. So, realize that, in truth, we live a struggle, but not a struggle where there are losers and winners, but a struggle where there are those who need to improve and forces that come to help them in this regard. It comes to chip away the edges that prevent you from fitting into that mindset. For most of your troubles, you will find solace in the words of Epicurus. No torment will be everlasting, nor unbearable, unless your imagination amplifies it and you listen to it in its natural dimensions. That's what's interesting. A Stoic quoting Epicurus. We have a very mistaken view of Epicureanism as an irresponsible pursuit of pleasure, which is not true. Epicurus was quite virtuous. We sometimes confuse it with being hedonistic or with some other philosophy. So, what Epicurus says here is very interesting. This is a great effect of imagination that amplifies things or gives them a negative value they didn't even have. Today we often refer to this in medical terms as the placebo effect. A simple glass of water, if you believe it's poison, can have a devastating effect on you, just as it happens the other way around. A glass of water, if you believe it's a miraculous medicine, can heal you from incredible things. The human imagination adds value, positive or negative, instead of seeing things as they are. By seeing things as they are, from my perspective of who I am, I can give the right measure and dimension to all things and realize that challenges are not greater than me, as I mentioned on another occasion. If I throw a ball at you and it is bigger than you, higher than you, it won't hit you. It will pass over your head. What hits you is because it is your size or smaller. And learn to see things free from passions, fears, anxieties, and pride, but to see them in their true dimension, because they are perfectly plausible for people who are the size that we are. In other words, our height. There may exist an extremely good man who is ignored by everyone. Always remember this. And also that very little is needed for a happy life. Honestly, this is such an obvious thing. I doubt you haven't noticed this already. Sometimes there's a person, a crowd on the street, and you see there's a famous artist, a famous politician. What gives people fame in our historical moment? Many times it can be fair, but other times it might not be. And it may be a fortuitous product of a circumstance, not a real virtue that person possesses. Sometimes you're in a corner, I don't know, sitting in a little bar to chat with a friend, and the person singing has a stunning voice. Sometimes, more than all the renowned singers, you say, well, recognition of an artist is not directly tied to the ability to create art or the ability to create justice. The recognition of a good politician or the ability to generate goodness, the recognition of a great man. Unfortunately, we don't have a very refined taste. We don't have a vision. Very developed, therefore, it is quite possible that today and throughout history, perhaps the best in everything have remained anonymous and have been happy and content just by being, and not by being recognized as such. I remember a phrase I read a long time ago, attributed to Indira Gandhi. I didn't even bother to check if it was really hers, but it went like this. Humanity is divided into two groups, those who do and those who receive recognition. Strive to belong to the first group. There's less competition there. That, to me, was a very interesting thing, which I keep as an idea. Who does? If there's recognition, great. If there isn't, keep doing it. The fight today is for recognition, which isn't always so fair. Live every day as if it were your last. Without agitation, nor laziness, without falsehood. This is what the perfection of customs consists of. The perfection of customs consists in loving life and respecting it. Even in our current historical moment, where longevity has increased significantly, generally, in most countries, it hovers around 70 to 80 years, with some variation. It's not much. Living for 70-something years. If you consider 70-something years as a single day, it's not little. It's a very significant unit. Perhaps it would be insignificant if you lived 1,000, 2,000 years, but in 70 years, a day is a lot. Learn to value it. It's a precious and scarce gift. Isn't it the same in the economy? Scarcity gives value to things. Try to have a certain economy of life and realize that a day is not to be wasted. It's a unit of what you hold most valuable, which is life. The life of the body, the life of the soul, the life of consciousness, and a series of other discussions that I won't delve into here. But life is a precious gift. Therefore, respect it, recognize its value. It is not as abundant as you think. Being immortal, the gods do not get annoyed by having to inevitably endure so many fools for all eternity. On the contrary, they care for them. And you, who will soon be gone and are of the same ilk, the fools, you have no patience at all. Understand, he lives in a coma, a moment of polytheism. He says the gods, being eternal, might not have patience with the annoying ones. You, and they do, they make themselves better. They go out of their way to help this annoying person. You, who are just as annoying, have no patience with him. You, who are of the same ilk, the same kind, have no patience. In other words, if a divine being has patience with something so small, why don't you, who are more or less the same size? Look at that, mixing in the middle of all this, Carl Jung with his concept of ego infraction. In general, our impatience with the faults of others means we consider ourselves far above them. Perhaps you have much greater annoyances. If you were able to see yourself from the outside, by the impact you have on your surroundings, perhaps you would realize that your problems are more serious and lead to even worse consequences. In other words, hidden behind this impatience, there is a lot of invalidity, pride, and a sense of entitlement. It's ridiculous that a person doesn't want to escape their own vices, which is possible, and instead tries to escape the vices of others, which is impossible. In other words, you can take your vices, space them out, and gain days without them, and reducing the number of times it manifests, moderating its expression, making it easier, you can gradually decrease the presence of vices in your life. But regarding the vices of others directly, you can't do anything. Indirectly, yes, through your example. Perhaps some may follow you, but through the imposition of force, you achieve nothing. And you will constantly encounter people who have vices. Because the entire world is dual. Now notice the deceptions we create within our worldview. Because all people are dual. Those annoying people you can't stand, and the ones you love the most too. And if this annoying person's flaw were manifested by someone you love, it would be insignificant. For him, it's unbearable. Notice how we set up barriers and tolerate things sometimes due to personal preferences and not out of justice. And we are intolerant, once again, due to personal exclusions and not out of justice. Expand your world, consider humanity as your family. You will start to notice that this view of others' flaws begins to change. Finally, if Socratic, a good benefits someone, why, like a scatterbrain, are you still searching for a third thing? Show that you did it and seek compensation. Man, what you did was already more than enough. You pulled someone out of a painful situation. You pulled someone out of the pit. Isn't that already wonderful? But if no one saw it, does it have value? Did someone take a picture? Did you put it on the internet? No, no one saw it. It has no value. In other words, we don't want the good itself, but the Socratic, social consequences it can bring us. In other words, if there's no kind of compensation for doing good, then the good itself wasn't enough. Look, this is one of the most common vices of our historical moment. We hardly love virtues for their own sake. We see that we can gain or avoid losing through flaunting them. That is not being virtuous. That's personal marketing, not personal value. In other words, reflect, notice how all of this is current, how it is present in our lives, and how, by bringing reflection and setting goals in our lives, little by little, we start accepting the chisel and begin to reshape ourselves. And when we align ourselves with the law of life, there are fewer rough edges to be hit. That's it, we'll stop here. And next time, we'll look at chapters 8 and 9. A hug.